pred nama je drugi panel u kojem ćemo govoriti o cirkularnoj ekonomiji i energetskim perspektivama Bosne i Hercegovine i regije. Prije nego što predstavimo učesnike i prije nego krene novi panel, pogledajmo video spot pokrovitelja UNDP-a u Bosni i Hercegovini. Pozivam gospodina Faruka Hadžića, dekana na Fakultetu za ekonomiju Univerziteta Sarajevo School of Science and Technology i makroekonomskog analitičara da nam predstavi svoje goste i da oni zauzmu svoje mjesto na bini. Hvala vam.
Hvala vam puno. Veliko je zadovoljstvo danas moderirati tako značajan panel koji je vezan za cirkularnu ekonomiju, energetske perspektive Bosne i Hercegovine i regiona. Ova tema je inače vrlo značajna, vrlo je bitna za naše cjelokupno društvo. Međutim, u posljednjih godinu dana čuli smo u mnogim izlaganjima kakav smo turbulentan period prošli, naravno to smo i osjetili. Energetske perspektive i cirkularna ekonomija je dobila još više na značaju. Zato su s nama i pozvaću svoje goste paneliste. Prvi od njih je gospodin Kinloch Pichat, zamjenik rezidentne predstavnice u UNDP u Bosni i Hercegovini. Izvolite. Gospođa Lada Buševac, šefica kancelarije AFC-a za Bosnu i Hercegovinu i Crnu Goru. Gospodin Gilles Rebattet, šef operativnog odjela za ekonomski razvoj, prirodne resurse i infrastrukturu Delegacije EU u Bosni i Hercegovini. Dalje sa nama je gospodin Richlove Mensah, regionalni direktor za trgovinu i investicije za Centralnu Evropu, Zapadni Balkan, odjel za međunarodnu trgovinu UK. Dan. I gospodin Branimir Muidža, generalni direktor Heidelberg Materials grupacije za Bosnu i Hercegovinu i Hrvatsku. Kada generalno govorimo o cirkularnoj ekonomiji, ona u stvari predstavlja jedan kao regenerativni ekonomski sistem u smislu gdje se razni proizvodni resursi, otpad, emisije, energija u stvari usporavaju, umanjuju, ponovno uključuju u jedan novi ciklus. Ono što je bitno reći generalno za cirkularnu ekonomiju, često se smatra da je ona možda u koliziji sa takozvanom našom normalnom linearnom ekonomijom, što u stvari i nije baš tako istina. Ono što je trenutno karakteristika linearne ekonomije u stvari da mi uzimamo resurse, proizvodimo, koristimo nešto i na kraju taj proizvod bacimo. Međutim, ovdje mi bi išli sa jednim potpuno drugim pristupom koji je vrlo bitan za cirkularnu ekonomiju. Da, koriste se resursi, međutim, produžava se u konačnici i životni vijek i na taj način postižemo ono što je vrlo bitno. Ne narušavamo održivost naše i životne sredine, ali također profitabilnosti kompanija. Zato je cirkularna ekonomija danas vrlo bitna. To je prepoznala Europska komisija 2017. godine i oni su tada objavili dokument koji je nazvan kao manifest za Europu efikasnih resursa, gdje je naglašeno da u trenutnom svijetu stalnog pritiska na resurse, na prirodne resurse, životnu sredinu, Europska unija nema drugog izbora nego da krene putem tranzicije ka resursno efikasnoj krajnjoj liniji regenerativnom modelu cirkularne ekonomije. Upravo zbog toga danas ću postaviti prvo pitanje gospodinu Kinlochu vezano za cirkularnu ekonomiju. Ona je, sami znamo, vrlo bitan sastavni dio agende održivosti, pogotovo u ispunjavanju Sustainable Development Goals, pogotovo u ovom slučaju govorimo o cilju broj 12, koji se tiče konzumacije i proizvodnje. Dakle, za vas pitanje, zašto je cirkularna ekonomija danas toliko bitna i možete li nam nešto više reći o mjerama UNDP-a koje UNDP generalno provodi da bi imali što bolji nivo cirkularne ekonomije?
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me and UNDP to this panel together with the other panel members. I mean, the very basic, simple answer to your question is that we live in a completely different world. And you have talked about SDG 12. Yes. And the SDG 12 looks at production and consumption patterns. And we see that the patterns are becoming more and more alarming. I mean, we can obviously talk about the impact of COVID-19. We can talk about the impacts of the war in Ukraine. But we can see that there are trends that are somehow worrying in terms of planetary changes and also in terms of what it means for populations in general. Now, one of the very important elements to remember as well is that the World Human Development Index that UNDP has been recording for the last 32 years has been regressing for the last 2 years. And that's the first time it happens. Just to give a sense of the scale of the changes. And we are going back to the Human Development Index we were in 2016. So that obviously is not a very small change in what's happening in the world. Also, the population obviously has increased. We are reaching now 8 billion people on Earth, and it's likely that in 2050 we will have reached 9.7 billion people, which is obviously taxing very important resources for mankind as well. Now, what needs to change is obviously production and consumption patterns and how we actually satisfy our needs without damaging the planet more than we already do. So it's quite useful to remember as well that we have increasing number of problems at the world level, and we are running out of time. We are not running out of problems, but we are running out of time. And this is why circular economy is so important, because the very principle of circular economy is to keep resources in circulation, resources that we have used in circulation as much as possible in order to reduce the footprint of mankind. Now, this is why circular economy has been presented and is offered as one of the many solutions that can help in this particular time. Now, clearly, it is important for biodiversity. It is important for reaching development targets. It is important as well to reach net zero emission, carbon emission, and it's very linked to sustainable development goals. Now, what is UNDP doing? What is UNDP's role in this challenging world and in this changing world? One of the offer that UNDP has put on the table at the world level is the global climate promise, which identifies opportunities for a circular economy at the global level and in the different countries where UNDP works. More importantly, looking at doing so in an inclusive manner so that it does not affect jobs and employment opportunity in an unbalanced way. And that those that live in those sectors that are potentially that need reform are not left behind.
Thank you very much. Hvala vam puno. U prošlosti smo govorili o reciklaži i tada smo koristili riječi smanjiti, ponovo iskoristiti, reciklirati. Međutim, cirkularna ekonomija je ipak nešto drugo, potiče malo drugačiji način razmišljanja, popravka, redizajn i ponovna upotreba. Čuli smo u izlaganju rezidentne predstavnice gospođe Nedere koliko je bitno danas imati triple I, insurance, investments, innovation. Možda u ovom slučaju nam je vrlo bitan i taj segment inovacija. Ukoliko ne dođe do promjena, naša mora i okeani će do 2050. godine imati više plastike nego riba. Gospođa Buševac, međunarodna finansijska korporacija IFC trenutno ima više od $1 milijardu uloženih u razne projekte cirkularne ekonomije širom svijeta, naravno. Možete li nam reći kakvi se projekti provode ovdje na Zapadnom Balkanu i možda navesti neke primjere uspješnih projekata širom Europe?
Hvala lijepo, Faruk, i dobar dan i zadovoljstvo mi je biti danas i učestvovati na panelu sa ostalim panelistima, kolegama panelistima. I prvo da pohvalim Faruka, jedini od nas je već otišao u sljedeću generaciju korištenja digitalizacije kao jedan od odgovora na klimatske izazove. Mi smo svi izašli sa papirima, što mislim da je lekcija za sljedeći put i za ubuduće. Mislim da mlađe generacije puno brže se prilagođavaju novim načinima i odgovaraju na klimatske izazove. To me vodi ka zapravo onome što hoću da kažem. Pošli smo sa konstatacijom da su okeani ugroženi, mora su ugrožene i nekad se to čini možda i udalje do onoga gdje mi živimo i kako živimo, mada problemi su puno bliži. Mislim da ste svi vidjeli, ponovno smo bili na naslovnicama brojnih međunarodnih medija sa vijestima o tome kako se skupio otpad na rijeci Drini, onda kad koristimo aplikacije, taj otpad je naravno većinski plastični otpad koji jednostavno se ne tretira i sistemski su problemi, tako i rješenja moraju biti takva. Onda aplikacije za naravno mjerenje čistoće ili nečistoće zraka kojim smo okruženi svaki dan. Kada otvorite aplikaciju, pogledate mapu cijele Europe, kada se krene od Velike Britanije prema istoku, sve je zeleno i kako se približavamo Zapadnom Balkanu, sve više narandžastih i onda crvenih onih tačkica, što znači da problemi sa kojima se suočavamo nisu samo okeani, nisu samo mora, nego su tu oko nas i u našem svakodnevnom životu. I zbog toga mislim da rješenja moraju biti sveobuhvatna, moraju biti zajednička, moraju najvažnije biti solidarna. I to je ono kada govorimo o pravednoj tranziciji, moraju biti solidarna. Uloga AFC-a, samo ću kratko u rješavanju, u davanju tih rješenja jeste ovo što ste pomenuli na samom početku, kako sada pomaći se od linearnog ekonomskog modela ka onome što je cirkularni ekonomski model. AFC polazi od onoga što su prvo kada radimo sa privatnim sektorom, u interesu država u kojima investiramo, ali prvenstveno sa privatnim sektorom. U tom procesu naravno rješenja koja nudimo sa privatnim sektorom moraju da odgovaraju na ono što su međunarodne obaveze koje i Bosna i Hercegovina i sve zemlje Zapadne Evrope koje su preuzele, to je Pariški sporazum i brojne druge konvencije. Znači to mora biti usklađeno. I sad kako iz toga, kad znamo da ima jako puno prioriteta kojima se moramo posvetiti, kako se odlučiti? Mi smo se odlučili da u cirkularnoj ekonomiji naš fokus bude na materijalnoj cirkularnosti. Da tu možemo vjerovatno najviše da doprinesemo, mada i u drugim oblastima i u svaka od tih oblasti naravno korespondira sa onim što su SDG ciljevi. Se polazimo od onoga što je za cirkularnu ekonomiju vjerovatno blueprint, ono osnovno načelo, principi cirkularnosti koje su razvili Ellen MacArthur fondacija, cradle to cradle takozvani model koji gleda tehnički ciklus, gleda biološki ciklus. U svakom vidu proizvodnje od početka od korisnika do iskopavanja određenih materijala se prati taj model tehničkog i biološkog ciklusa na koji način produžiti korisnost određenog proizvoda prije nego što on dođe do svog prirodnog kraja, svoje smrti i kako i u tom trenutku ponovno ga nekako reciklirati i iskoristiti. Znači što manje da bacamo, što manje da odbacujemo i što manje da koristimo, da mijenjamo to nekim recikliranim materijalima. I u skladu s tim naš je fokus na 3 stvari. Korištenje što manje ekstrakcije, manje materijala, prirodnih takozvanih virgin materijala i mijenjati ih recikliranim materijalima. U ovom trenutku danas se 90 gigatona materijala iskopa, raznih prirodnih materijala, resursa se iskopa i da biste mogli vidjeti, shvatite zapravo koliko je to, jedna gigatona je oko 10.000 potpuno napunjenih transportnih aviona. Znači 90 gigatona se trenutno iskopava. Drugi naš cilj jeste da ono što je već došlo do svog krajnjeg cilja života, znači neka plastika, otpad, da se produži njegov život tako što se ponovno vraća u cirkularni neki ekonomski tok. U ovom trenutku mislim da je podatak s kojim mi i Ujedinjene nacije, Svjetska banka i mi operišemo jeste da se samo 9% trenutno vraća, a od onoga što je trenutno na odlagalištu, znači sva naša odlagališta, samo 13,5% se na ispravan način priprema, odvaja da bi se moglo kasnije iskoristiti, znači neselektivno odbacivanje otpada. I treći fokus jeste da se u onoj fazi dizajna, znači prije nego što se i krene sa definicijom onoga što je problem, kad se ide kroz proizvodnju, da se zapravo računa na održiva rješenja. Da se što više, šta god da se proizvodi, da mu se produži tok tako da što više ide kroz taj krug potrošnje, ponovne potrošnje, remanufacturing, reuse, ovo što smo rekli na kraju. Zvuči jednostavno, ali naravno da nije. U ovom trenutku ono što možemo reći da je podatak ponovo šokantan, da 70% ugljičnih gasova koji izađu u atmosferu, 70% od toga potiče od proizvodnje, određene proizvodnje, bilo kojem dijelu lanca snabdijevanja. Šta će odrediti ono što se može desiti, šta možemo očekivati? 4 su trenda, jedan je demografski, promjena načina života, ljudi sve više dolaze u gradove, drugačija su očekivanja i tako dalje. Disruption tech, zapravo tehnologija koja može da izazove određene promjene i pogotovo zelena green tech, koji u ovom trenutku veličina tržišta je oko 9 milijardi američkih dolara je veličina tog green tech tržišta, što je velika prilika generalno za privatni sektor. I samo da pomenem da je ambasadorica rekla da je 3% za istraživanje i razvoj u Švedskoj se odvaja, od toga 2% je od privatnog sektora. Privatni sektor može i mora da bude nosilac inovacije i u ovom dijelu i zelene tehnologije i generalno inovacije. Veća društvena svijest je naravno nešto što će također trend koji će odrediti koliko ćemo brzo ići u tranziciju sa cirkularnom ekonomijom. Društvena svijest u smislu da već ljudi, firme postoje koje ne žele da idu u hotele koji nisu potpuno certificirani kao zeleni i tako dalje. Povećan fokus vlada investitora, nešto od toga je pomenuto na prvim panelima, mislim da okolnosti, okruženje, zakoni, politike su vrlo važni i šampionski odnos nekako, da neko preuzme tu lidersku ulogu u kreiranju novih rješenja, bez obzira koliko je velika uloga privatnog sektora, mislim bez politika vlada nećemo moći ništa uraditi. Sad, kako mi doprinosimo tome u svim ovim segmentima i kroz inovaciju i pomoć po izradi novih politika, mislim da je najbolje da samo kratko pomenem jedan primjer projekta koji je dovoljno velik da već sada se nekako analizira za cijelu regiju na koji način druge lokalne zajednice mogu da ga primijene i iskoriste. A to je projekat finansiranja za pomoć u izgradnji, strukturiranju novog postrojenja za proizvodnju, korištenje otpada za proizvodnju toplotne električne energije u Beogradu. To je Vinča, odlagalište smeća koje je bilo, neki su nazivali kao ekološka bomba koja samo čeka da eksplodira, veličine oko 185 fudbalskih igrališta, 600 kamiona neselektivnog otpada, kako iz domaćinstava, tako građevinskog se istovaralo na 15 km od Beograda i na samoj obali rijeke Dunav. Znači, ekološki i u svakom drugom smislu velika opasnost. U partnerstvu sa gradom Beogradom smo pomogli da se strukturira projekat javno-privatno partnerstvo, sada je to već završeno, gradi se fabrika koja trenutno, čini mi se, opskrbljuje nekih 30.000 domaćinstava sa električnom energijom i omogućava da se ostatak toplotne energije da se ubacuje u sistem centralnog grijanja grada Beograda. Ali ono što je najvažnije jeste da 65-66% ukupnog otpada sada dolazi na to odlagalište i koristit će se odmah prva faza, jer ono što je tu bilo, da se prečisti, da poveća kvalitet života, da smanji te ekološke negativne posljedice, a u budućnosti naravno da se radi sistemski sa selekcijom otpada, tako da su minimalni ostaci i minimalne negativne posljedice za lokalnu zajednicu i generalno za ljude koji tu žive. To je jedan od primjera, ima ih puno, on je iz cirkularne ekonomije možda jedan od najočitijih gdje su najveće bile negativne ekološke posljedice, ali mislim da su prilike za poslove. Nedavno smo radili finansiranje projekta u Poljskoj, malo dalje, Elemental Holding, $90 milijuna, najnoviji načini kako da se iskoristi elektronički otpad i kako da se što više maksimalno izvuče, recimo, vrijednost iz litijumskih baterija i tako dalje. Znači, tehnologije nove postoje, način razmišljanja naše je da ponudimo podršku kroz finansiranje, da one koji su, a privatni sektor je jako svjestan ne samo izazova, nego svjestan i prilika kako da što prije idu i iskoriste te prilike. Prilike su niže cijena, niži trošak proizvodnje, inovacija i što je najvažnije, mislim da kogod je jutro slušao o problemu odlaska mladih ljudi, ovdje ima jako puno prilika za kreiranje novih radnih mjesta i takozvani upskilling. Ali eto, tu bih stala, mislim da sa radnim mjestima najbolje da sada završim, nadam se da ćemo imati prilike.
Hvala puno na vašem odgovoru. Kako bi ubrzala tranziciju Evropske unije na cirkularnu ekonomiju, Evropska komisija je usvojila novi akcioni plan cirkularne ekonomije u martu 2020. godine. To je jedan možda od glavnih temelja Evropskog Green Deala i koji u stvari govori o agendi održivog rasta. Tranzicija Evropske unije na kružnu ekonomiju, na cirkularnu ekonomiju će smanjiti pritisak na prirodne resurse i stvoriti održivi rast i nova radna mjesta. Gospodine Rebattet, možete li nam reći nešto više o zakonodavnim pa i drugim mjerama koje mogu donijeti stvarnu vrijednost Evropskoj uniji, naravno i Zapadnom Balkanu u ovoj oblasti cirkularne ekonomije?
Thank you very much, Professor. Good afternoon to all. I'm very pleased and honored to be here and to address such knowledgeable and respectable audience. And I must confess that I'm a little bit intimidated and impressed, so thank you for your attention and your indulgence. Yes, I agree with you. It's a set of actions, not only one, with the goal of reducing pressure on resources, on natural resources, but also ensuring sustainable growth and jobs, and to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. Before going into more details on this new circular economy action plan, let me just remind very briefly the general objectives of the European Green Deal and what the European Union would like to achieve. In brief, no net emission of greenhouse gas by 2050, but before that, by 2030, a reduction by 55% of greenhouse gas emission compared to the 1990 level. The next one, which is extremely important for circular economy, is economic growth decoupled with from resource use. The social aspect is no person and no place left behind, which is a major social challenge. And yes, the Commission has adopted a set of legislation, a long list, I must say. I will try to be as concrete and concise as possible, not being boring with a long list of things. But first, I would like to recall again, as it was said, the shift from the linear to the circular economy, because it's something really big. We were used in the old economy models to take, make, use, and dispose. And the big shift we have to do, and when I say we, it's collectively, it's the producers, the economic actors, the policymakers, and us, all of us, consumers, is to rethink the way we are going to conceive products, redesign, reduce, reuse, and recycle. And once again, it's a big challenge. So just let me give you some facts and figures of where we are with linear economy versus circular economy. The European economy is still mainly linear, with only 12% of materials, recycled and reused. So we are far from the goal. Manufacturing firms spend on average in the EU 27 40% of cost on materials, on supply of materials. 90% of biodiversity loss is caused by resource extraction. Plastics, it was said, represent 80% of marine litter, and this poisons all wildlife in the seas. It is estimated that 20% of food in the EU is either lost or wasted. And now that's the state of play, but opportunities, it's circular economy could provide a shelter for, in particular, small companies, to a shelter for preventing them to be subject to the current resource price and high fluctuations. And it is estimated that applying circular economy could increase the GDP of EU by 0.5% by 2030 and create 700,000 jobs. Now, yes, I'm coming to the new circular economy plan. We say new because there was a former one, and the former one has not been very successful, if I must say, because it was more about incentive and nothing compulsory. So now we go more in details and we go stricter with standards. So basic pillars of the new circular economy plan. There is a sustainable product policy, so the policymakers define what is a sustainable product. Then key product value chains, and the focus will be made on sectors which have a high potential for circularity. I will come back in a second on this. Reducing waste for more values, cross-cutting actions, and then again the key words were said: innovation, research, and digitalization. So there is a definition of sustainable product policy, and there is a definition as well as in an eco-design directive. The key words, we all know them: durable, reusable, repairable, recyclable, and energy efficient products. So just in brief, these directives address the waste management, the used water management, the plastics, the construction sector, the heavy industry, and food and agriculture as well. So all this is available on the EU website. I will not put the long list of directives, but it does exist. And once again, it's part of a strategy. It should not be taken one by one. So what about now, very briefly, with the Western Balkan countries? The Western Balkan countries have adopted the EU Green Deal principles, and they are committed to include the alignment of their legislation with European targets in their EU accession process. They are committed to develop also circular economy action plans with the same major topics. I would quote again: waste legislation, circular economy strategies, waste prevention, and smart specialization to foster innovation. So to conclude, in brief, I would say the Western Balkan countries are very much encouraged to align their legislation and regulation with the EU, but not only to adopt, but also to implement them, which is not easy. It's not easy even in the EU, but it's not easy when the environment of the rule of law is weaker. Develop strategies for circular economy, but also I would stress local action plans, and what the word now, which is very fashionable, is inclusive, but it is very important to include all local actors, producers, industrialists, consumers, policymakers, together to build local action plan. Encourage innovation, and I will probably come back on this. And I would say, I mean, I don't have to give advice, but what I've seen in the field and what I've heard, I would kindly say that for policymakers, leave space for innovation. We do not know what is innovation. You don't know, I don't know what will be new tomorrow. Leave space for innovation, focus on what is crucial is public, animal health, risk for the environment, consumer protection. But leave the researchers, leave the economic actors innovate. And if we still have time, I will give you an example of a case study in this country of pioneer of circular economy. Adopt policy to act, it's the thing. Leave space for innovation, but then maybe adopt policies which just regularize or act what is already happening in the field and give some space to go further than this. And for all actors, joint platforms of exchange, joint partnerships. Thank you for your kind attention. I hope not to have been so long.
Everything is fine. Hvala vama. Idemo na narodno pitanje. Ujedinjeno kraljevstvo je posvećeno kretanju ka cirkularnoj ekonomiji, koja će nam generalno svima omogućiti da zadržimo resurse u upotrebi što je duže moguće i naravno izvučemo maksimalnu vrijednost, korist iz tih resursa. Ono što je bitno u tom procesu jeste da minimiziramo otpad i promovišemo efikasnost resursa. Paket cirkularne ekonomije je uveo revidirani zakonodavni okvir, pronalazeći u stvari, identifikujući korake za smanjenje otpada i uspostavljanja ambicioznog i održivog dugoročnog puta ka upravljanju otpadom i reciklažom. Možete li nam, gospodine Mensah, reći nešto više o iskustvima Ujedinjenog kraljevstva i u implementaciji mjera cirkularne ekonomije?
Well, many thanks, Faruk, and many thanks for having me here. It's been a fantastic discussion thus far, and I'm going to be very brief because my esteemed panelists have effectively covered most of the things that I want to cover. But just to make a general observation about the world in 2023, I think we've had a broad discussion with a number of ambassadors and some preeminent speakers about what the world will look like in 2023. And I think it's fair to say that is slightly gloomy, that is going to be rather challenging. I don't think there's any doubt about it. It will be really challenging. But as the British ambassador said earlier, where there's challenge, there are opportunities. So I think we should look to, I suppose, take advantage of those opportunities in the year ahead. It will be challenging, but there will be opportunities as well. Now, with regards to your question, like I said, I'm going to be very brief because the panelists who spoke before me have really covered most of the issues. I think the current structure of the global economy really encourages waste. So we make products, we take resources from the earth to make products, and we use it one time and effectively discard those products. And with global population increasing year by year, it was quite striking this year, I thought, that there was reports that China's population growth has slowed down significantly. But what wasn't talked about was the fact that India's population had grown significantly. And in fact, the UN is predicting that in April, India will overtake China as the most populous country in the world. Now, this huge population growth will mean huge resources to provide demand for all the people that are being born. So that will mean that there will be huge pressure to use more resources. And I think this is where circular economy really, really comes in. The principles of circular economy, as has been said before, is to stop waste being created in the first place. So the sort of linear approach of producing, using, and wasting is stopped at the source. And the UK is very, very keen to make circular economy, I suppose, the framework that most countries follow. It's very, very important, circular economy, because not only does it stop waste, but I think it's a really important element to stop biodiversity loss, pollution, because of course production causes pollution, and of course waste. So with that in mind, the UK has 3 key principles on circular economy. The first is to eliminate waste, which I've already talked about, but also pollution. Most of you will perhaps recall that London was one of the first cities in the world to charge cars to drive into central London, to introduce congestion charge, and that reduced the pollution in London significantly. So pollution linked to waste is very, very important. That's why eliminating pollution and waste is one of the key principles. The second is to lower the environmental impact of production and indeed on consumption as well, both in the UK and overseas. And once again, the UK is a pioneer for this because we were one of the first countries in the world to mandate that single-use plastic bags are charged. And that significantly reduced the use of plastic bags by about 90% in the first year. And I think we ought to do more of that going forward. The third bit, which I think is incredibly important, is to use the opportunity of circular economy to create opportunities for businesses. Because there are significant commercial opportunities, and I don't think that should be overlooked. So the UK, we work hand in glove with businesses to create the framework for them to develop the technologies that will enable the circular economy to thrive. And on that front, back in 2020, in November, the UK government, working very, very close with industry, created 5 new centers of excellence to look into how we can reuse more products in the textiles, construction, chemicals, and the metal industry so that we could boost the environment and also create jobs by relying on excellent technology. By bringing together all these disciplines, so academics and businesses, we're able to develop those innovative technologies. And I think the panel have already talked about the importance of working with businesses. But of course, we haven't stopped there. This isn't just a UK problem, it is a global problem. So we have to work hand in glove with all partners around the world to make it easier for the adoption of circular economy principles. And on that, we used our G7 presidency back a couple of years ago now in 2021 to set up a new working group with our G7 members on how to use resources efficiently. But we have not limited the discussions with just the G7 members. We've actually broadened it out to include non-G7 countries like Indonesia, Mexico, and Argentina to also contribute to this really important discussions. And of course, we also used COP26 presidency in Glasgow to really galvanize support for the adoption of circular economy principles. So it's a global problem, and I think working internationally is the only way to make this a success and to make it more of a normal thing for any country to adopt. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Hvala vam puno. Napravili ste odličan uvod za ono što sam mislio pitati gospodina Muidžu. Cirkularna ekonomija uključuje zdraviju planetu Zemlju. Naravno, cilj je smanjiti zagađenost. Čuli smo koliko je važan i taj cilj smanjenja zagađenosti. Naravno, smanjiti pritisak na prirodne resurse, na vodu, na zemljište. Tvornica cementa Kakan je jedna od kompanija koja je uspjela od prljave proizvodnje napraviti pozitivan slučaj i tako u stvari smanjiti taj pritisak na okoliš koji imamo. Gospodine Muidža, postavit ću vam dva pitanja, povezana su. Nadam se da ćete vi to lijepo odgovoriti i povezati. Prvo pitanje je vezano za to koje ste sve aspekte cirkularne ekonomije vi kao kompanija uspjeli primijeniti, a onda na tragu tog odgovora na to pitanje volio bih da nam kažete koliko je po vama bitno da država generalno bude uključena u taj segment, u različite vide podrške kompanija u Bosni i Hercegovini, da li putem određenih namjenskih fondova, da li putem određenih poreskih olakšica koje je potrebno provesti ili nekim drugim stimulativnim mjerama kako bi se uopšte unaprijedio aspekt energetske tranzicije i cirkularne ekonomije unutar kompanije u Bosni i Hercegovini.
Hvala lijepo. Evo, sve sam zapamtio sva pitanja, ali idemo ovako jednim redom. Dakle, naša industrija, prije svega da bi dao dodatni kontekst, treba reći to da je beton najrasprostranjeniji i najkorišteniji proizvod koji je napravljen od strane čovjeka koji se koristi u svijetu i koristi ga se duplo više nego svih ostalih materijala zajedno. Dakle, gdje god danas, evo sad uperite pogled gore, dolje, lijevo, desno, naprijed, natrag, vidite u vašem fokusu beton koji je u ovom slučaju napravljen konkretno kod nas u našem pogonu. Cement za ovu zgradu je napravljen u našem pogonu u Kaknju. Mi smo svaki dan, da kažem, okruženi sa pitanjima cirkularne ekonomije i rekao bih iz svog iskustva da je cirkularna, odnosno kružna ekonomija, nužna ekonomija, zelena ekonomija, ekonomija koja ima svakako perspektivu, opravdanje, a isto tako mi koji smo prije svega i u realnom sektoru imamo obavezu primjenjivati društveno odgovorne standarde u našem poslovanju. Dakle, industrija cementa kao takva nema nus proizvoda, međutim mi koristimo nus proizvode drugih industrija. Na primjer, za proizvodnju struje nus proizvod je pepeo. U termoelektrani Kakanj recimo ima oko 200.000 tona pepela godišnje, u ostalim termoelektranama još otprilike 600-700.000 tona. Nus proizvod u proizvodnji željeza recimo u Zenici je troska. Te troska ima oko 400 do 500.000 tona godišnje, a mi godišnje u našoj tvornici zbrinjavamo oko 200.000 tona kombinirano pepela i troske. Dakle, mi smo u centru te kružne ekonomije, jer šta bi se dogodilo da mi to ne koristimo, to bi završilo negdje u prirodi, a znamo kako se u Bosni i Hercegovini, nažalost, zbrinjavanje vrši na neadekvatan način. Još jedan primjer gdje mi kao industrija smo jako korisni, ne samo za čovjeka, već isto tako i za okoliš, jeste da recimo sve više koristimo zamjensku energiju, zamjenska goriva. To vam je sve ovo što pliva recimo u našim rijekama, u rijeci Bosni, drvo, papir, otpad, plastika, gume, sve se to već više desetljeća uspješno koristi u cementnoj industriji. Dakle, ne koristimo više toliko u toj mjeri ugalj kao nekakav prirodni resurs kojeg crpimo iz prirode, nego ga zamjenjujemo nečime što je otpad i dajemo mu neku novu vrijednost. Time na taj način smanjujemo značajno i CO2. Ovi efekti o kojima sad pričam mjere se u milionima tona u našoj industriji, ovdje samo u regionu, mjere se u milionima, stotinama miliona eura, a na nivou Europe pričamo o milijardama. Čuli smo od kolega u uvodu koliko je to jako važno. Evo samo ću još jedan aspekt istaknuti. Dakle, cement se, kao što znamo, koristi za proizvodnju betona. Mi sada radimo na projektima da produžimo životni vijek isto tako betona, da zgrade, na primjer, nisu vijeka 50 godina, nego 100 godina. Zatim koristimo isto tako sve više materijale koji su zamjenski, dakle ne koristimo samo šljunak iz rijeka, ne koristimo samo kamen, već isto tako nastojimo koristiti nekakav građevinski otpad koji zamjenjuje te materijale. Dakle, taj bi se građevinski otpad reciklirao i koristio u betonskoj industriji, čime bi isto tako smanjili nešto što uzimamo iz prirode. Dakle, mi svakoga dana imamo jako puno aspekata korištenja kružne ekonomije. Mislim da je to jako važno poslati kao poruku, isto tako u Bosni i Hercegovini ima jako puno kompanija koje su svjesne svoje društvene odgovornosti, međutim isto tako zbog toga ste i postavili to drugo pitanje, svjesni smo okruženja u kojem živimo i znamo da u Bosni i Hercegovini još uvijek nismo prije svega sa svijesti, a onda ni sa zakonskim rješenjima došli do toga da shvatimo u potpunosti vrijednost ovoga o čemu pričamo, da shvatimo nužnost i obavezu djelovanja. Mi smo kao industrija spremni poduzeti zaista čitav niz investicija i koraka kako bi dodatno unaprijedili taj segment, kako bi što više tog otpada koristili. Svaki od nas ovdje proizvede otprilike oko 500 kila otpada godišnje i danas on u Bosni i Hercegovini ne zbrinjava na adekvatan način, a kada bi imali selektivno razdvajanje otpada, onda bi se u našoj industriji to moglo koristiti umjesto goriva koje sada koristimo. Smanjit ćemo CO2, ostavit ćemo te materijale u prirodi, imat ćemo puno kvalitetniji zrak, tlo, okoliš, imat ćemo puno kvalitetniji život, ima isto tako i standard naših građana. Dakle, imamo puno konkretnih primjera iz naše industrije i mi svakodnevno radimo konkretno na ciljevima i za 2030. godinu, ali isto tako i za 2050. godinu, dakle 10 godina nakon što odemo u penziju, već sada razvijamo investicije koje će polučiti dodatne pozitivne efekte po okoliš. Svi ti materijali koji danas plivaju u našim rijekama, u našem pogonu gdje radi peć koja radi na temperaturi 1450 stupnjeva, u gorjeniku 2000 stupnjeva, to vam sve u nekoliko sekundi izgori bez ostatka. Dakle, to se sve uspješno može koristiti u našoj industriji, ali je potrebna ta prva neka pretpostavka zakonska, a onda isto tako da sve ostalo to prati, da imamo pogodno razdvajanje otpada. Mi imamo prednost da jednostavno možemo prepisati zakone iz našeg bližeg susjedstva i imat ćemo puno bolju ekonomiju, puno kvalitetniji okoliš i puno kvalitetniji život.
Hvala vam puno. Idemo sada obrnutim redoslijedom sa drugim pitanjima. Uoči posljednjeg COP27 premijer Ujedinjenog kraljevstva Rishi Sunak obećao je da će Ujedinjeno kraljevstvo učiniti super silom čiste energije. I tada je izjavio, citiram, moramo se kretati dalje i brže ka prelasku na obnovljivu energiju, a ja ću osigurati da Ujedinjeno kraljevstvo bude na čelu ovog globalnog pokreta kao super sila čiste energije. Velika Britanija je već smanjila emisije ugljika i to puno brže nego druge zemlje iz grupacije G7. Obnovljivi izvori poput vjetra, sunca sada čine više od 40% ukupne opskrbe energijom, što je 4 puta u stvari više nego prije 1 deceniju. Gospodine Mensah, možete li nam, molim vas, podijeliti vaša ta iskustva? Dijelom smo već to i odgovorili u prvom dijelu pitanja, ali u ovome segmentu koja mogu pomoći, evo recimo i nama u Bosni i Hercegovini i drugim zemljama Zapadnog Balkana.
No, absolutely. Thank you very much. And I think it's a very, very important question. And this was addressed back at COP26, and the Prime Minister reiterated our desire to become an energy superpower in Sharm el-Sheikh. And as you rightly said, we have already demonstrated that you can decouple economic growth from carbon emissions. Just to give some statistics here, so between 1985 and 2016, the UK's GDP grew by 71%. However, our carbon emissions decreased by about 34%. So we have demonstrated that it can be done. You can grow the economy by reducing carbon emissions at the same time. This was, of course, driven by a structural change across the economy and technological developments. I think we've talked a lot about technological innovation here. Innovation is the key driver for this. We couldn't have grown our economy the way we did and reduce carbon emissions without the right level of innovation and the adoption of new technological framework. What we've also done is we've also used government policies to really drive home the importance of reducing carbon emissions. In 2008, we enacted the Climate Change Act, which mandated that we will reduce our global emissions by 80% compared to 1990 levels. We're the only country, well, the first country, other countries have followed since, but the first country in the world to enact such legislation. And our companies are doing very well out of this because government is holding them into account. I've already mentioned that this isn't something that we can do alone. We have to do it both with industry and with our international partners. Working with industry, we launched an export strategy in November 2021. And at the heart of this strategy was clean growth. So we want to increase UK exports, but not at the expense of the environment. So we are working with all our businesses to actually export our clean growth credentials, the capability that we've developed over the years to other countries to help mitigate the effects of climate change. Alongside the export strategy, which we've developed with industry, we also have a 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. Of course, the industrial revolution started in Manchester, so I think it's fair for the UK to take a very active role for the next green industrial revolution. And the 10 points that we really are implementing in the UK, the first is advanced offshore wind, because it's really, really important in terms of increasing the energy mix. The second is low carbon hydrogen, so both blue and green hydrogen. Third is advanced nuclear fuels, and I couldn't agree more with Her Excellency, the French ambassador, who eloquently made the point that nuclear power should be part of the energy mix earlier on. And in the UK, our great company, Rolls-Royce, have led the way in developing small modular reactors for nuclear that we are hoping to export around the world. And we're engaging with governments across Central Europe and beyond in exporting that technology. We are also, the fourth point is also on zero emission vehicles. So electric vehicles, the sale of electric vehicles in the UK has exploded in the last 10 years. But what for me is really important is that we shouldn't take the increasing levels of electric vehicles being sold as a sign that we're moving away from coal. Because in most countries, including in Poland, where I'm based at the British Embassy, most electricity is still generated by coal. So the electric cars are still being charged by coal, which defeats the objective. So selling electric cars should be used hand in glove with actually producing green electricity that enables the cars to run effectively. So it's really, really important for us that we just don't sell electric cars, but how we generate electricity to power those cars are also as green as possible. We're also working with industry to develop jet zero and green ships, because of course international trade with goods and services crisscrossing around the world means that trade contributes significantly to climate emissions. So we're working with industry to develop those sustainable modes of transport to make that possible. We're also doing a lot on green building, and I'll be really interested to hear your thoughts on the cement and modular construction and modern methods of construction that uses less cement, because I suppose cement production is one of the key emitters as well. So something that the UK is keen to also develop. We're also looking at carbon storage and capture. So we store the carbon and capture it and reuse it for other production. And the two final things on the 10-point plan are nature conservation and restoration, and green finance and innovation. London has become somewhat the center of green finance. And again, we are working with governments across the world to export some of the technology know-how that we have developed in London. Once again, this isn't a UK problem, it's a global one. So that's why we work with our like-minded partners, G20, G7, UN, and international partners to develop all these innovative ideas. And I've already talked about what we did at COP26 to really highlight the importance of phasing down coal. I think one of the biggest achievements at COP26 was that 190 countries signed up to reduce the use of coal to generate electricity, and I think this country was one of them. And that, in effect, reduced the number of new coal power plants being developed by about 73%, which is significant in the fight against climate change. And we are working with all sorts of countries around the world to export our technology. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Hvala vam puno na odgovoru. Preći ćemo, opet ćemo se vratiti na Europsku uniju. Jedan od ciljeva Europske unije je u stvari smanjenje emisija. Kako bi u stvari cijeli europski kontinent postao klimatski neutralan, što u stvari može stvoriti i kreirati nova radna mjesta i otvoriti nove, naravno, poslovne prilike. Veliki izazov na tom putu će naravno biti i proces energetske tranzicije koji možda možemo reći da je rat u Ukrajini ubrzao ovaj aspekt kako bi u stvari Europska unija postala energetski neutralnija. Gospodine Rebattet, možete li nam reći koliko su sada kompatibilni aspekti cirkularne ekonomije i energetske tranzicije i mogu li oni danas donijeti novi nivo ekonomskog razvoja u Europi?
Thank you so much. It's a very interesting question. Compatibility between the transition, the creation of sustainable jobs, very interesting. But I would like to start again with facts and figures very shortly because, I mean, just to point what we are talking about. Yes, you are very right. The EU wants to be the first continent to be climate carbon neutral by 2050. Here are the domains, the economic domains, which emit the most greenhouse gas. Electricity, so generation of electricity is 20 in the EU, is 27%, then followed by transport 20%, industry 19%, and in particular, it's good that we have our partner of the cement industry, in particular the heavy industry, and it's good also that we hear that there are major progress made. And then buildings, 13%, 9% for residential building and 4% for service building, including the public sector, and then 12% for agriculture. So yes, the major challenge is the energy transition, but beyond that it's decarbonization. Why do we want to do this? I mean, for the purpose of climate change, we want to be able to all live on this planet, including other species, not only the human species, but all species that we want to live on Earth again and for the next generation. Then what we would like to achieve is reduce the dependence on the energy imports, security of supply, and here one of the key words is energy efficiency, because the best energy is the one that we don't have to produce. The best energy, the best kilowatt hour is the one that we will not use because we don't have to produce it. And then we do it for the purpose, as said before, of public health, air quality, water quality, and well-being of human beings. So why is it a must? Why? Because once again, it's a global challenge, and we have all to take a fair part of it. And where it's a must, it's because the global economy has put in place value chains across the borders. And in a very near future, so it's more and more integrated, but in a very near, and now I'm talking more about the Western Balkans and Bosnia and Herzegovina. In a near future, the main economic actors, and one of those is the EU, will set up taxes at the borders, I mean the CBAM, which means that the carbon product will be taxed when they enter the EU market. So if such economies want to continue to be integrated and wants to be in the global market, they will have to produce with low carbon level. Otherwise, they will lose all kinds of competitive advantage. So that's why it's a must. Coming back to energy efficiency, there is a huge potential, not only in the EU, as I said, but also here in the Western Balkans and in Bosnia. For instance, in the Western Balkan countries, energy intensity, which is measuring the energy use to produce €1 of GDP, is about 3.5 times higher than the EU 27, mostly 4 times higher. So there is a huge potential for energy efficiency. Now I would like to, because there are many domains, but I said transport is the second one, and I would like just to have a brief highlight on urban smart mobility, which is very relevant for Sarajevo in particular because of the air quality. So 40% of emissions of the transport sector are generated by urban mobility. And I said that transport is the second one after the generation of power. And what I want to also illustrate here is that we are always talking about cost. Cost is a major obstacle. We have to look for and find finance. But there are also benefits. City networks congestion is estimated to have a cost of 1% of the EU 27 GDP, 1% because of congestion, let alone the impact on health, on human health. So for developing urban smart mobility, I mean, I will just quote a number of measures. There are high-level service buses for outskirts with high frequency, dedicated traffic lanes, priority at crossroads, service for short-term, just few hours or a day rental electric car, and again, yes, the origin of electricity is crucial. Car sharing, bicycle environment, and I will come back on this. And reduce access, as you said, in London, for instance, reduce access to city centers for most polluting vehicles and more expensive parking place, but not to deter people and not to affect the poorest people. Then it has to go hand in hand with developing efficient public transport services. Now, and also reduce the spatial expansion of cities and densify the cities, because it's very easy to let people build further and further, but then the cost on carbon is very, I mean, the impact on carbon is very high. So to respond also to your question, it's there will be new jobs, there will be opportunities. We have also to take into account that there will be losses of jobs. But all in all, as I said, it's estimated that there will be a benefit for the whole GDP. For instance, in that case, car manufacturers would not necessarily be very happy with the expansion of public transport. But then you have to think about other jobs, like what I say, rental, these car sharing platforms, these short-term car rental cars, and also bicycles. As we said, we have to reuse, so we have to go to an economy where there will be more and more manual work, and it's local. Manual work for repairs, for mending, for assisting people, for maintenance. So there might be losers, but it's for sure there will be winners as well. And the benefits, as I said before, usually they are not subject of estimation, which is but air quality, public health, well-being, less congestions are benefits. So now I would like to share with you, in a way, a case study of, I paid a visit, and I will not give names. I paid several visits to companies. I paid a visit to a well-known agro-processing company, and I will not say even the location, not to offend any entity, policymakers, etc. It's a very successful one. And they deliver with their fleet of trucks. They deliver their own products in the country and beyond in the region. Once again, it's an agro-processing. So they have, and they realized that the diesel cost was more and more affecting their production cost, and especially the fuel that they were putting in their trucks. And then they had a lot of used vegetable oil, which was the waste of the agro-processing of fruits, of prunes, of peanuts, etc. So they had a lot. And then they start thinking that, okay, we are going to find a technology. And they found a simple technology, and they transform this wasted vegetable oil into fuel for their trucks.
I will have to interrupt you just because we are already out of the time for full panel, and we still have 2 questions, and I would kindly ask you just to try to conclude everything. Is that okay?
Of course it is, and sorry to be long. Just to say that there are opportunities, there are pioneers, and in this case they cannot go beyond because there is no local legislation regulation about how to collect vegetable oil and how eventually to supply or to sell the surplus of oil. So that's what I was saying before. Let innovation go, but then at a point of time with policies, let us support it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Hvala vam puno. Već smo probili termin za naš panel, ali evo, zamolit ću vas samo ukratko u kratkim samo crtama da nam kažete vezano i za ovaj aspekt složenih projekata, energetskih projekata na tržištu razvor koje AFC provodi sa finansijskog aspekta. Zamolit ću vas u tom dijelu da nam kažete koje iz tog segmenta također podržavate projekte na Zapadnom Balkanu.
Hvala. Prvo, naravno, regija je između krize i tranzicije, šta je važnije, rečeno je toliko kriza i tranzicija. Mislim da nema alternative, tranzicija je neophodnost. Sad u kontekstu te tranzicije ono što mi radimo jeste što se smatra konvencionalno infrastrukturni projekti za obnovljive izvore, naravno solar, vjetroelektrane i tako dalje. I tu je naravno što hoću da kažem tradicionalno i ono što je pokazalo da je dobro rješenje da je partner privatni sektor, gdje regija je u procesu kreiranja novog balansa koji se trenutno, cijela regija se oslanja većinski na ugalj, jednim dijelom na plin. Treba da nađe taj balans. Nemoguće je odmah krenuti sa tranzicijom i ukinuti u potpunosti ugalj i plin, ali je moguće razvijati kvalitetno i efikasno obnovljive izvore energije. Mislimo da je solar i da je vjetar, evo i novi modeli koji su upravo pomenuti i offshore i onshore wind i hidrogen, da su to tehnologije koje u principu ne mogu se samo donijeti. Mislim da je važno da privatni sektor bude taj koji će izaći sa rješenjima, a da mi kao investitori, kao investicijska institucija treba da pratimo zajedno u partnerstvu sa financijskim institucijama na terenu. Ono što radimo jesu, znači, pored finansiranja takvih projekata, ima ih više koje mogu pomenuti, koji su karakteristični, transformativni, velike vjetroelektrane, da ne ulazim sada u iznose 300-400, nije ni važno, to su naravno veliki projekti, zahtijevaju jako puno rada, pripreme, ali je vrlo važno da postoje određene politike i da nosioci odluka su ti koji donose, vode se međunarodnim obavezama i potrebama za tranzicijom pri donošenju odluka na koji način se treba ići u diversifikaciju. Pojačana saradnja sa lokalnom zajednicom je ključ, jer tu se i većina negativnih i bilo kojih posljedica i osjeti, onda uvođenje certifikata, standarda ESG, EDGE i tako dalje. I što je već pomenuto, mislim da je pored izgradnje novih objekata koji pomažu da se taj balans sa javnog prebaci dovoljno na privatni sektor, sa uglja na obnovljive izvore, važno je da imamo i finansijske instrumente, mehanizme, ono po čemu smo također lider u svijetu, izdavanje zelenih i plavih obveznica koje su već zaživjele ne toliko na cijelom području Zapadnog Balkana, ali u nekim susjednim tržištima poput Rumunije i tako dalje, Evropska unija naravno. Nadamo se da ćemo pomoći da i sa financijskim institucijama na Zapadnom Balkanu, da budemo pioniri novih financijskih instrumenata, bilo plavih ili zelenih. I naravno, ovo što sam rekla, nastavit ćemo da tražimo prilike jačanje infrastrukture. I još jedan projekat ću pomenuti koji je važan za privatni sektor. Mislim da je privatni sektor ovdje, već je pomenuto, važan, mali je, ali dovoljno otporan, baš zbog tih izazova postao jako otporan, izlazi sam sa novim rješenjima. Jedno je od rješenja koje je sada kako iskoristiti priliku nearshoringa. Imamo value chain projekat koji zapravo inkorporira sve ono što su najbolja rješenja za povezivanje, ali povezivanje na moderan, drživ način. I drugo je kreiranje, finansiranje, razvoj zelenih industrijskih parkova. Eto, mislim da je dovoljno za ovo.
Hvala vam puno. Gospodine Kinloch Pichat, s vama smo otvorili, s vama ćemo i zatvoriti panel diskusiju, ali ne mogu da vas ne pitam na kraju. Znamo da, svi se nadamo da ćemo do 2030. godine da će se u stvari svi SDG ciljevi ispuniti, što bi u stvari značilo da ćemo svi imati cirkularne poslove u konačnici. Međutim, da bi izbacili tu riječ, postoje nam u stvari mnoge prepreke na tom putu. Upravo u posljednjoj godini dana vidimo šta se dešava u Ukrajini, rat u Ukrajini. Možete li nam reći, molim vas, i u tom kontekstu, šta je sve potrebno da uradimo da za 7 godina možemo reći da su svi poslovi u stvari cirkularni?
Thank you very much. I'll first start by thanking my co-panelists because they gave us a very good example of what circular economy is about by making a very effective use of their time and not only giving us food for thought, but also something for me to build upon. So I guess if the economy was working that way, I think we would be in much better shape. So thank you for that. What I'd like to say, I mean, we have talked about SDG 12, which is a very important sustainable development goal. Well, I'd like to divide what I'm going to say in 2 parts. One, about what we as the UN Development Programme are doing, which we think is going in the right direction. And second, very briefly, in terms of what needs to be done at the global level. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have been supporting the draft roadmap for circular economy in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which looks at identifying the sectors that are priority for implementing the principles of circular economy. So we see that as a very important step. We are also implementing a pilot program on circular economy that works very closely with the private sector. 5 companies in order for them to produce, to improve the way they produce, to have a more limited impact on the environment, as well as create employment. This is a second element we are working on. We are also looking at transposing the EU directive on single-use plastics, which is also a very important step. And we, in the way we support the authorities and the government in the country, we are also supporting more generally the principle of circular economy, but also in our program in developing circular economy portfolio, which looks in a transversal way at circular economy throughout the various sectors in which we are working. One important element as well, I believe, in the world, at the global level, in terms of what we can do, I would say that it's summarized that in three ways. One, we need to consume less. We know that in the last century, we have consumed, and the increase in consumption has been 10 times. In use of resources and consumption has been 10 times the increase in population. So there's something we need to change about that. We need to consume less. And there's quite a bit we can do for that. We can do it by changing our diet, the way we approach food, and food that have less impact on the environment generally. There are very, very different ways we can do that. We need to consume better. We know, for instance, that a vehicle, a car, is usually parked 95% of the time, and we use it the remaining 5% to move. So there's quite a bit we can do about finding sharing platforms. We can do about reducing the way we consume, for instance, cultural goods like music or films by using streaming rather than CDs or DVDs, which is a very plastic intensive. So we need to consume better. And third, we need to create systemic change in terms of how we consume, and that's by creating also incentives for circular economy principles. The UK has been giving examples, for instance, in terms of taxing the production of plastic that is not made at least of 30% of recycling. That is one example. I think the Republic of Korea also launched a very vast program for reducing food waste and for encouraging food waste recycling. So those are useful examples to look at the global level. So in a nutshell, consume less, consume better, and create the conditions for systemic change in consumption patterns.
Hvala vam puno. Hvala puno. Mislim da smo završili ovaj dio panela.
Jesmo. Okay. Idemo, nastavljamo dalje, tako da evo ga ovim putem vam se zahvaljamo i vama i vašim panelistima. Evo ga, ako može, aplauz.